Hello everyone, lovely to see you all again. I'm Mr. Urban and welcome back to the film music writing course. This is the second lesson. Last week we were looking at writing a melody in film music and thinking about is that melody for a villain or a hero, and just little tips and tricks on how you can sort of create it and mould it around a character. And then today we are going to look at adding harmony to that melody. And just thinking about what is harmony, what are some basic harmony progressions that we can use to put to a melody, and more specifically think about how they work together, melody and harmony. Okay, so something that's really really basic and really important are primary chords when you're adding harmony to something, and they're chords 1, 4 and 5 in a scale. So for example, last week when you picked your scale, thinking about the numbers of your scale. So we're using C major, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I want you to see if you can find the notes 1, 4 and 5 in that scale. So for example, with C major, 1 would be C, 2, 3, D and E would be 2 and 3, and then F would be 4, and then G would be 5. And then what we're going to do, once we've found that 1, 4 and 5 in our scale, we want to build it up into a triad. Now you may be asking, what is a triad? So in music, a triad is a set of 3 notes that are stacked up in thirds on top of each other. Okay? So we look over to the example on the left, you can see we've got primary chords in C major. So we found our C, F and G. So the degrees 1, 4 and 5 in the C major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. And then what we're going to do, like I've listed underneath, is we're going to start stacking them up in thirds. Okay, so a third in music is when you play a note, skip a note, play a note. So in C major we'd have C, skip a note, skip the D, we've got the E. So that would be a third. Okay, and we're going to stack it up in with 2/3 on top of those notes that we found, that 1, 4 and 5. So if we take C for example, we've got our C, we're going to put 1/3 on, so we've got an E, then add another third on, so skip a note, we've got our G, and that there, C, E and G, like listed here, is a C major chord, and that's chord 1. Okay, so that's our first primary chord in C major. Now the next one, we're going to go to 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4 in C major. That 4th degree, like we talked about, is our F. And then we're going to stack it up in thirds. So we've got an F, skip a note, play a note, A, skip a note, play a note, C. So we've got F, A, C, and that's an F major chord. Now you may be noticing that you recognise major and minor. Remember, minor is sad, major is happy. Okay, so these are all major chords. Now we've got G major, so we do the same process. Do the G, stack the B on top, skip a note again, D. And we've got G major, so we've got C, F and G, chords 1, 4 and 5 in C major. Now, if you did pick a minor key, for example, your chords may be a bit different and they might not all be major. For example, if it's an A minor, chord 1 is A minor, chord 4 is D minor, the fourth note up in D minor, and that's going to be our chord. And then chord 5 is E major. Okay, think about our harmonic minor scales. So it's a bit different, and that's where it starts to get really interesting. Now, the next step we want to be thinking about is putting it with our melody that we worked on last week. So looking back to your melody, you want to now think about putting your chords with that melody that was based on a villain or a superhero, whatever you wanted to base it around. Now, try this out. So find your primary chords and then find your melody from last week and see if you can just have a little busk at putting them together. Now, if you're not a pianist and you haven't got that option of playing the piano, a great resource is Online Pianist, and you can actually you can try this out by finding the note names and playing actually on your keyboard on the computer and playing chords. And then maybe if you record your melody over the top, you can hear them both at the same time. Or if you want to be really fancy, something that's really helpful is an app called Acapella. okay, or an app where you can that you can record yourself, because you can start layering up different sounds. So if you, for example, play the violin or flute, you could play one note and then record another note and then another note, and then you've got a chord there, okay, and then you, over the top, you can practice your melody over your primary chords. So you don't need to be able to play the piano at all to be able to do this. There's many different ways that you can start workshopping your melody and your accompaniment together. Okay, so just try it out, improvise with those different techniques. Now, some tips, tricks, and examples to this. You may be giving this a go once you've sorted out all the technology, or if you found your primary chords and you're starting to put together your melody, and it just doesn't sound good, and it doesn't really fit together. It's super important to be thinking about your melody and your harmony underneath at the same time when you're doing this for it to sound great. And you want to use notes in the melody. So the notes you've got in your melody, you want to use the sort of same that you've got in the accompaniment underneath, so that they both work together. Because there's no point having a completely random chord in the left hand, but your melody is something a bit different, because then it doesn't fit, does it? So you want to use kind of the same notes that are appearing in the chords, our primary chords, and in the melody. If you do need to change your melody to fit the chords underneath, you can do that. You can adjust that so they start to just click like a jigsaw puzzle and work together, and you'll start to notice that. Another thing to think about is the strong beats of the bar. In music, we have strong and weak beats in the bar, and you want to be placing those chords on the strong beats so it fits with the shape of the melody. Now, if you have a look at my melody over here, for example, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. So you can see that the strong beats in 4/4, if you remember, is 1 and 3, beat 1 and 3. And you can see that my shape of my melody seems to sort of hit those points. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, okay? And those chords are also going to do the same. They're sort of going to highlight those really strong beats, the 1 and 3. So you can see in my example at the top, we've got a chord on beat 1 and also beat 1 in the next bar. Now in the third bar over, I've put chords 1 on beat 1, C major, and then our F major, I've put it on beat 3. So we have... So you're actually getting a really nice, strong and confident sort of quality out of it. If the chords were, for example, not on the main beat, it might sound a bit funky, so I'll just give that a go. Now if I put it on the strong beats, then it suddenly starts to click together. So that's another thing that you can start to be thinking about. Now, major and minor chords. Remember, if you are in a minor key, like I've already mentioned, chords 1, 4, and 5 may be major or minor, depending on the accidentals, so your sharps or flats that you have in your key signature in your scale. So check your chords are correct, okay, because that is very, very important for it to be sounding right, okay? Or ask your teacher if chords 1, 4, and 5 are this, this, and this, and they might come back to you and actually say, oh, that's really good, but just make sure that you've got this flat or this sharp in here, okay? Now, for you bright ones that really find this easy, you can challenge yourself, and if you feel like the primary chords that you've picked are restricting your melody, why not try out some different chords in your scale to accompany your melody? So instead of using chords 1, 4, and 5, I've got a little list down here. In C major, this is chords 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in C major. And you can start to have a little elimination process of what chords you can put with your melody. So in my second example here, I've taken the process of looking at my melody and then going down to my chord chart and having a little look what chords I can use. So for the first one, I've got a C in. So I've picked my C. I've also got a C in F major and A minor, but I think it's good to start off with the key that you're in. So I've started off with C major. Then I've got a G in this next one. Now I've also got a G in E minor and G major. So I've chosen to go with E minor. Through improvise and experiments, I think that sounds the coolest. So I've put E minor there. Now I've gone along to C next, and haven't used F major yet, and that's got a C in. So I've gone to F. I could have gone back to the C, but I think the F sounds quite nice. So we've got, it sounds quite good. And then for the rest of the music, I've done the same. I've taken that process of just choosing chords which fit with the melody notes. Now you can see that I've kind of mirrored what's happened in that melody, but in the harmony underneath. So I've picked a D chord because it's got an F here, but I've got an F sharp. So we was thinking about that Lydian last week, that Lydian sharpened fourth. Now I've also done the same in the chords underneath. So I've picked the same note and I've sharpened it just so they match together. So on that last little bit, going from A minor, I've got my Lydian there, and I've just mirrored that and copied that in the accompaniment by sharpening that F as well, okay? So just playing that second example, you can see where you can start to be working towards. And then already there, you've got an amazing superhero theme, okay? Or, like we talked about last week, you could be thinking about your villain theme, okay? Really, really good stuff. There's some tips and tricks there. Few final thoughts is things to be thinking about is find your primary chord. So count the numbers of notes in your scale, first of all, until you find your 1, 4, and 5 in your scale, and then build up your chords in those thirds that we talked about. And you can always rewind the video to just remember what thirds are, or you can ask your teacher as well. So placing your chords, remembering music, thinking about those strong beats of the bar and where you will place those chords. You'll be wanting to place these chords on those main beats like we talked about, so it just really creates shape, otherwise it would just sound a bit off, okay? So just for now, think about just finding those strong beats in 4/4, the time signature you've been thinking about, and putting those chords on those main beats. Now, like I've said last week, you don't need to write it down. If you're confused how to write down your accompaniment on paper, your harmony, it isn't necessary to write it down as music, okay? Like I mentioned previously, using a recording app on your phone to document your harmony is great. Or you can think about other creative ways of writing your music, not even using notes, okay? But I would try to encourage you to get some manuscript paper. You can always print it offline, type it in Google manuscript paper, and you can actually try and have a go writing down your chords yourself, okay? Very, very, very good practice for looking at different clefs. But for improvisation and coming up with ideas, maybe try and get a recording app, or looking at the online pianist, and then you can really sort of start to practice your ideas. So I hope that helped, and I wish you have good fun coming up with the harmony for your amazing thing that I'm sure you have, and I will see you next lesson. See you later.